Welcome to the J. Scott Outdoors podcast. Today we have an episode with Clay Hill of Hill Guides and Outfitters. Clay is a sixth generation rancher in Grand County in Colorado. Clay, how you doing?
Doing great, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, for sure. We're going to have fun today. You're somewhat of a mule deer nut. Being a sixth generation rancher, how has being a rancher in Grand County for six generations, how is that, sometimes when guys like yourself grow up around mule deer all the time, you almost get sick of it. How has that actually been the opposite with you and made it where you just really, really enjoy mule deer?
So I'd say the benefit of being in this area for so long is that we tend to know most of the ranchers and locals around here, and local knowledge is worth its weight in gold, in my opinion. And I mean, it's allowed me to be on a lot of different properties and see a lot of different areas, and in Colorado especially, more vague, but I mean, it's put me in some places that people don't normally get to see, and I get to see animals that other people usually never see during the hunting seasons. So I mean, it's helped me a lot in scouting and getting familiar with different spots and mainly people, man. You can't.
Yeah.
You can't. So yeah, it's awesome being sixth generation rancher up here.
Sixth generation, that's just unbelievable. So that's like going back into great grandpa type stuff. You got stories from some of the old timers, that have been passed down, like, oh yeah, my great grandpa used to trap up here. I mean, I'm sure that some of the crazy stories you've heard as a kid, you got any of them that you could share with just history of your family, and I'm sure they've seen ups and they've seen downs and seen hard times. I mean, I love talking to old timers. Just wondering if anything jumps out at you from any of your generation that you could share with us.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of family history with my family. I mean, on my mom's side, my great-grandfather was a state senator, and on my dad's side, he was kind of a land tycoon around Silverthorne and stuff. He actually started the town of Silverthorne, Colorado. So we've kind of grew up here and established a lot of the different areas in the valley. But the coolest thing to me is all the old timers. You don't even see pictures because they don't really care about the Boone and Crockett, entering their deer or anything in the books. But you go to these old timers' house and there's just 220-inch, 230-inch bucks hanging in their living room from the early days, and you've never even seen them. Most people don't even know what's around. So it's made it. Yeah. I mean, it's pretty cool going around and seeing all the big deer and animals killed, and those guys tell you stories, but man, you'd have to hear it from them to appreciate them.
For sure. Let's tell the listeners, when you say Grand County, for those that aren't familiar with Colorado, kind of give maybe a geography lesson as far as where is Grand County and some of the borders and the country or towns that kind of encompass that area.
So kind of the heart of it is Kremling, Colorado, and it goes south to Silverthorne and then north towards Steamboat Springs. And then to the east, we got Granby, and it's kind of bordered on the Gore Range on the west, which is where Eagle County starts. So it sits in a big valley here. It reminds me a lot of like Gunnison County and valley there. A lot of big sage bulls, and we got Quakies and timber up higher. So we have really, really good deer winter range also. So that's why we get a lot of deer from different areas that travel down here into the valley.
When I spend the summers in Colorado, there in Carbondale, and before that I was in Vail for 5 years, and so I got to go and fish the Blue River quite a bit, around Silverthorne, out of the Dillon Reservoir, and then below Green Mountain Reservoir, floating on the Blue, and the Blue, correct me if I'm wrong, comes out of Lake Dillon and flows down through that valley, through Green Mountain Reservoir, and then eventually into the Colorado. So in essence, that valley right there, is that kind of the center point of the valley, if not, is it not? I mean, there's a lot of country to the east there, and there's a lot of country to the west.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the Blue is, if you're a fishing guy, everybody knows about the Blue River. And, but yeah, it does kind of lie right in the center. And I mean, these units are huge, man. They go all the way to the Rocky Mountain National Park, and we border a lot of those areas too. So it's a big area.
On your own personal hunting, do you get time to go out and not only now but growing up, were you able to hunt a lot? And if so, what were you mainly hunting?
So yeah, I grew up. My dad was an outfitter in the state of Colorado during the 80s and 90s. So I grew up in hunting camps with him, and as I got old enough to hunt at 12 years old, man, I was out in the hills all by myself, and my dad took me out, and I mainly hunted mule deer then. I mean, I've shot bears and mountain lions and, I mean, numerous elk, but even at a young age, I've always been involved with the mule deer. They always are what seems to catch my eye, and it's what's got my full attention, you know?
Well, your dad being an outfitter, did he outfit in Grand County, kind of right where you're at now, or were you guys in a different area?
No, he was based out of the Kremling area here also. And at one time, there was one landowner that he owned a majority of all the private ranches here, and my dad had all those leased up, and he was a big outfitter at that time.
So, hanging around your dad as a kid and being introduced, around mule deer all the time, would you say that the prime years are behind us, or do you see every bit as big a deer now? Or, I mean, what do you remember as a kid compared to now? Is there any change?
Honestly, I think that it's getting better just with, the state parks and wildlife. They're trying to manage our herds and keep harvest numbers down. I mean, back in the old days, it seemed like they shot everything. I mean, 4-point, spike bulls, everything, 4 points. Any deer they were happy with. I mean, the camps, they were killing everything. So you didn't see the quality of animals that you see nowadays, in my opinion, in most of the units in Colorado. And, I mean, around here, we're starting to get a lot of, in my eyes, trophy potential. A trophy's different in everybody's eyes, but you see a lot of them 170-plus type deer. And it's kind of like that in the whole state, man. I mean, anywhere you go now, you have a great chance of shooting there's a 200-inch deer in every unit in Colorado, so it's awesome. The Parks and Wildlife have done a good job managing it.
Do you remember when pretty much all of Colorado was over the counter? And then I want to say it was about 15 years ago, and sorry for not being able to state the exact date when it all changed, but when there was a big push towards limited draw on the deer as well as on the elk, and I'm sure the public outcry of people, outfitters, I'm sure it was a big heated debate. Were you a part of that as far as, were you just a kid then, or were you right in the middle of it? And, how has maybe your opinion changed, or opinions that you've seen around you, whether it be people in town and business owners and what have you? How has that all played out in your mind?
So I was pretty young when they were doing all that. But, I mean, I know that at the time, like you said, the public outcry, everybody was pretty upset about it. They were worried they wouldn't be able to shoot a deer anymore. Their chances were going to be slim to none of getting a tag. And, I mean, really, in all reality, it's still pretty easy to draw most units in the state. There's a lot of great units that take 0 points. And in hindsight, I mean, all it did was benefit the wildlife, and it gave the wildlife a chance to reach a mature age, in my opinion. Now we got great deer, like I said, in the whole state. Our elk are getting better quality. I mean, it helped everything. And now the locals have kind of accepted it. And I mean, it's, like I said, it's not that hard to draw most of the units in the state. So everybody's kind of come to one with it.
Yeah. But I mean, before it was pretty much all the units were just, over the counter, and the resource was taking a beating. And it's just awesome to see how Colorado has been able to manage some over the counter units, and then also have limited draw and have the quality of their animals, go up. I mean, they've always shot big bucks in Colorado, always. Every single year there's always big bucks, but it just seems like the better management and the trophy management for older age class animals, it's been great to see how an opportunity like Colorado is, it's like the place for mule deer, in the West. And, it's not bad for elk either. Colorado still doesn't probably see the real high end bulls like, Arizona and Nevada and Utah. But they do have quality elk hunting. And I would argue that probably there's more elk hunters in the state of Colorado than all those other states probably combined.
Yeah, I would agree 100% with you there, man. There's a lot of over-the-counter tags, statewide tags, with the exception to some of the limited units. But I mean, yeah, there's a lot of elk hunters out here, and we have a huge elk herd, so a lot of opportunity for elk hunters in the state of Colorado. And like you said, now we're starting to see a lot of the 330 to 340 type bulls in units where if you used to shoot a 300-inch bull, it was a giant bull for that area, and now you're starting to get that 330 type bull in there. So it all helps out, and it's made it all good.
I've got a question. It's kind of moving. It's kind of switching gears on you, but in the state of Colorado, as far as private property and public property, in the state of Colorado, does the private land have to be properly marked in order for it to be enforced as trespassing or no trespassing, or is it doesn't even have to be marked? Because I know in Arizona you have to have, I want to say it's like every 150 feet or something, the property has to be marked. It has to be marked at all the ingress and egress locations. And if it's not, people can actually trespass and get away with it. But I think Colorado's different. Do you know from your recollection, like what's the specifics on that?
So yeah, here we don't have to have our private marked. It's the public, they have to know. I mean, that's why, for instance, like Onyx Maps is blown up in the state, and most of your big hunters, they use that, like the Bible, man. Everywhere they go, they got that in their hand, and they're walking these private boundaries. And I mean, it's a useful tool for Western hunters now in most states, but especially here, because as soon as they set foot over that fence line, I mean, these private landowners, they're watching their land, and they don't want to see people on there that ain't supposed to be. So yeah, you have to know where you're at all times here.
So in other words, if it's not marked and you're walking out through the middle of someone's property and it's not marked, you can be every bit as liable for trespassing as if you jumped right over the no trespassing sign. Exactly,
and you do not want to be caught on private here without permission, and especially you do not want to shoot an animal on private, because they kind of throw the book at you if you do that. So definitely be careful if you come out here in Colorado and know your property lines.
Yeah. As a mule deer, having a love for mule deer, it's kind of a love-hate relationship, I know, with the elk and the amount of elk that you guys have. How do you see the balance of mule deer and elk in your country there in Grand County? Do the elk indeed definitely push the mule deer around? And what have you personally seen growing up there?
So, I would say that they don't really bother one another here. They both kind of have different habitat, and in this area, all the way up to Canada, and I think even down into New Mexico, we've had the beetle kill hit us, and we have a lot of timber up high. And I remember when I was younger, the grass and stuff wasn't as good in the timber, so the elk always came out on the big open faces in the parks and the Quakies, and you could kind of set people around in the parks, and they had a good chance of shooting elk and stuff. But now with the beetle kill, the sun goes through there, and we got grass, up to, over their backs in a lot of the timber spots, so the elk never even leave the timber most of the time. I mean, they can eat, they can drink, they got cover, they can hide from people. It's noisy in there. If you're hunting in the timber, it's loud, and so they kind of got they got the one up on us in that aspect. But in my opinion, the elk, they don't really come out in the deer country any time of the year. I mean, right now in the winter range they're sharing it, but everything's just kind of surviving,
What has your winter been like? Because we're hearing, I've been keeping close tabs on it, obviously, because I'm a fisherman and I fish there all summer, and most of the places are 130 to 160% of normal. What have you seen specifically in your area this year as far as snow levels, snowpack, and where are you at right now?
So early on in the winter, in December, we got pounded with snow. I mean, it was looking like it was going to be a real hard winter. It pushed the wildlife down low by the highways early in the winter, and everything was getting hit by the cars. And we got into January, and it warmed up for like 2 weeks. We had 2 weeks of 50-degree weather, and it melted all the snow off. And like right now, it's bare to 8,500 feet, so all the wildlife moved back up. They're off the highways. I mean, it really changed. And I mean, in my valley, in the area where I'm at, I mean, the wildlife's doing great. There is some areas in Colorado, like Gunnison. I know that they're having a little bit harder of a winter, and they were feeding some of the wildlife, I think more so to keep them off the highways and out of people's haystacks, ranchers and stuff. So I know they've encountered a little loss with their wildlife, but I still don't think it's as bad as like the 2007 winter and in that area.
How important do you feel it is for antler growth? Like here in Arizona, we live or die by our moisture, whereas, Colorado, I feel like it's not as big of impact. But I was just curious what your thoughts are for antler growth for those mule deer. How important is it for it to have a warm January and have melt off where those deer are not stressed? And can you directly say that it, affects their antler growth?
Yeah, I think it all does. I mean, like you said, we're not as dependent on water as Arizona and some of these other states that rely on it. We got a lot of water in Colorado, a lot of rivers. I mean, our water is it's really lush. And but as far as the winter goes, I mean, if we have a hard winter, it's really hard on our wildlife. And if the snow drags out into, April, May, and they're still having a hard winter, they just can't get that nutrients they need to get them horns growing good early on. And I mean, it does affect them. Last year I seen a little bit of a horn deduction, I guess you could say. They didn't grow as good last year as what I expected some of the bucks that I watch year after year to do. I thought they'd blow up last year, and they didn't. And we kind of had that winter that drug on last year, and it was cold. We had negative temperatures for, a month in a row, and it does affect them for sure. And in early spring always helps. They can get when they start growing, they lose them horns and start growing right away. I mean, the more nutrients and higher proteins and all that stuff helps. So it's a big deal here, our winter.
And are all of your antlers on the ground already? We're recording this the 9th of March. I'm just curious if all of your elk and all of your deer have dropped, or where are you at with those deer and elk on their antlers dropping?
So I'd say about 90% of our deer have dropped. I still see some of the smaller bucks carrying. Most of the larger deer have dropped. I haven't seen any elk yet that have dropped. They usually start going here a little more towards the end of this month. So, but the deer, they started dropping early this year. I kind of always use Valentine's Day as a rule of thumb of when they drop in this area, and they were dropping in January this year. It was kind of weird.
Do you think that's because of that warm up in January? I mean, do you think that had anything to do with it?
So I think they got a little stressed out in December when we had we had a lot of snow in December, and I think they were kind of going into that survival mode, and they were like, hey, we're going to get pounded this year. And just the stress and everything, it kind of triggered something that made them start dropping in January there, and then it warmed up, and it kind of lingered on. But for the most part, I mean, they were all dropping into January, most of your bigger bucks,
Your deer there in Grand County, which way do they go? Let's talk a little bit about where do they winter? Like, do they go north, or which direction do most of them go?
So the way that Grand County and Middle Park sits is it's like all big mountains at the top, and it all funnels down here into these big sage valleys. And the sage valleys go, I mean, man, they are huge. It reminds me a lot of Gunnison, like I said earlier. But I mean, they winter anywhere from Granby to Kremling all the way to Silverthorne. Just hang out in these valley floors. It's a big area, and we get a lot of deer that come a long ways. I mean, they've started putting radio collars on a lot of the bucks and does around here to kind of see where they are going and manage them and watch where they migrate. And we're getting deer coming over here in Kremling from Walden, and there's some, they got to go over the Continental Divide to do that.
So they're traveling a long way. Walden's over in the park, right? Walden's in over by Rocky Mountain National Park.
And it kind of is, but more so, it's up by the Wyoming border. So it's it's a long ways. As a crow flies, it ain't super far, but if you put the miles on and all the mountains they got to come over to get here, it's really amazing to see that these animals are coming here.
So in other words, those animals are coming south and west away from Wyoming border and coming down south in all that sagebrush there around Kremling.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not saying all of them do, but they are. For the amount of collars they have on deer, they've had some bucks and stuff that have traveled from Walden and over in that valley over here. So, I mean, it's hard telling where a lot of these deer are coming. And I know that we see a lot of great deer. Is that like 30,
40 miles, or is that like 70, 80 miles?
It's about 55 miles around on the highway.
Wow.
So it's a good ways, man. And, and you can, in the wintertime here, we see a lot of really, really good deer, for quality size, trophy size. And come summertime, you just never know where the heck they're going to be.
Yeah. And speaking of that, in the summer, they can be down low right on the Blue River all the way up to, up high, right?
Exactly. And, that brings up another good point I was going to mention is, so in the valley we have here, when I was younger, I mean, there was all big cattle country, big ranchers. And over the years, because we sit kind of in the middle of all the ski resorts, we've got a lot of the very wealthy people that have moved into this valley because they can buy 1,000 acres for what they could buy a house for in Vail. So these people are moving in here, and they don't want any part of the cattle anymore. So they're not running cattle on their properties. They're not hunting. And these are big ranches. There's some 20,000 acre ranches here where they aren't hunting at all. And if they are at all on some of them, it's very limited. So on a good note, though, what it's done is it's allowed a lot of these deer and elk to reach mature ages, and you see a lot of the big bucks on their property and bulls, and it's kind of helped our area too, as far as trophy quality.
When do you see the most rutting activity? I have a feeling that a lot of it is actually after your fourth season hunts, but I'm curious, I mean, when do you see the most rutting, and how prolonged is it? Like, when will they rut till like where you're just seeing them go crazy, and then when does it kind of wane off?
I always feel like Thanksgiving is kind of the peak rut in most of the areas in Colorado here. We do see them starting pretty good. It's that fourth season. And a lot of it to me is, I mean, I know there's a lot of stuff that goes into the rut, but our weather here, if we get a lot of snow, it pushes a lot of them deer down into, smaller areas. And I think when they get in those smaller areas, you get some of those does go into their estrus cycle and stuff. And you see, they kind of kicks it off. And so it can trigger, and they can go in third season too. Third season's always a really good time too, but Thanksgiving generally seems to be like when everything is going and the bucks are just dumb.
And it's probably awesome to run around with you in a pickup around Thanksgiving time, just looking at, I mean, you could literally go and look at 40, 50 bucks in a day?
Oh, easily. I mean, you could drive around Thanksgiving into December, and when these deer start migrating in here, it ain't nothing to see $100 a day,
Wow.
It's pretty cool.
I'm looking on your Instagram page, Hill Guides and Outfitters, and there's a buck you've got a video of that's got a bunch of trash on his. It's the latest post you've made. He's kind of by a wire fence there, and you can see he's got a couple J-hook kind of kickers on the left side, and his G3 or G4 is forked. His main beam is forked. That's a cool deer.
Yeah, and like that kind of goes back to what I was telling you about all these people buying these big ranches. is those are the kind of deer that are surviving. And as a note to the public, you know, I mean, when that rut kicks on, these deer do come off of the public and they go down in, or off the private and they go down into the public. So it's definitely something that I think that, you know, a scouting tool. People, if they want to come hunt this area or they draw these units, they should spend some time in the summer and early fall seeing where these bucks are, because generally they stay within, you know, 10 or 15 miles of that area in the rut. So I think it's a good scouting tool for people.
Well, I think, like you said, having those sanctuary areas where these deer can you know, grow up and get big, but as soon as, you know, they go chasing does, they could end up anywhere. Like, I mean, it happens every year in Colorado where, you know, a big giant deer is all of a sudden right smack dab right in the middle of public ground chasing does.
Yeah. And, you know, them big bucks, they tend to know the boundaries in that archery season. They know where they're safe. But as soon as the rut kicks on, I mean, most of your big mule deer guys, and anybody for that matter, they know that there ain't no fence lines. They don't know any boundaries. And I see a lot of people up here now, like I said, with the Onyx maps, they're walking our fence lines and a buck jumps it and they shoot it, you know. I mean, more power to that guy because he did his research and he deserved it, you know.
Yeah. I'm also looking here. There's a big velvet buck with a big hanger on his. Looks like he's got a hanger on his left main beam, and then he's got like a extra main beam eye guard on his left side as well. There's a picture you holding them. What buck is that?
So that was the 2015 Colorado Governor's Tag. He was a very special deer, man. It's pretty cool to, so I a little story about me. I usually end up helping some of the Colorado Governor's Tag hunters and scouting the state and using my knowledge of the locals and just different ranchers throughout Colorado to help them out. So I get to see some really cool deer, and that deer and was a very special deer to us. Pretty neat to see him.
What was did you guys have a nickname for that bugger?
Oh man, I can't remember what the heck that rancher was calling him.
There's a bunch of big deer on your Instagram page. It seems like Colorado kicks out some non-typical bucks. In general, around your country, you know, is it more common to see, you know, big typical bucks or big non-typical bucks, specifically where you're at?
You know, if you look in the record books, there's a lot of big typicals taken out of Eagle County, and we border Eagle County, so I think we get the trickle effect over the years, and we've got a lot of those typical genetics over here. And like I was telling you, you go into some of these old-timers' houses, and you just be, you know, in awe of the bucks they got hanging in there. But I see a lot of just giant typicals that have never even been entered in the record book. But saying that, you know, like you said, we do got a lot of the non-typical genes over here. Different areas seem to hold more. But it's a pretty rare thing to see a buck like that anywhere in any state. So I don't want people to have high expectations seeing those 240, 250 inch bucks, you know.
Yeah, they're pretty exceptional bucks for sure.
For sure.
In your mind, these big deer that are, you know, that you've been a part of getting killed on the governor's tags and such, you know, can a deer how old is a deer like some of these bucks? And in your mind, you know, can a deer blow up from say 3 to 4, or where is kind of the magic number that you've seen where deer can just, you know, explode and blow up?
Yeah, that's a funny question because I honestly don't know. And I've always thought, you know, a 6-year-old deer was about at his peak of his life. But that deer, for instance, that you're talking about, the velvet deer on there, when we walked up to that buck, man, he was only a 4-year-old deer. And it was just amazing to me that you could get a 258-inch deer at 4 years old. So I would have liked to have seen him, you know, the next year and see what he did, but it's you just never know.
Yeah. Well, and too, it's hard when you've got a deer of that caliber. what are you going to do? Let him go and run the risk that, he runs off in the wrong spot and gets shot. So, I mean, I think even with the governor's tag, you have to take your opportunities when they present themselves. And, it's hard to, hold back and not shoot a deer, because you don't know if the wrong time he, gets sick after some does and just wanders straight out in the middle of, public ground, and maybe where it's 100% draw too.
Yep, for sure. And a trophy in everybody's eyes is different. I mean, I deal with a lot of the guys that want the 200-inch deer or nothing, and unfortunately that's very hard to do anywhere. 200-inch deer is a very special deer, no matter what he has or what he is. I mean, it's very hard to get a 200-inch mule deer, and people come to me all the time when they see the pictures, and I'm like, you don't understand. That's a very special tag, and we get to hunt a lot of country to find that one deer.
Yeah, for sure. With what you know about Colorado, in your opinion, for the public land hunters out there that are really into it, in your mind, do they have a better, which hunt, whether archery, muzzleloader, rifle, which hunt in your mind, if someone had a lot of time, could they consistently kill big deer in Colorado?
And what's funny is I really feel like a good archery hunter, if he would spend, 15 days, 20 days up in a lot of these units, he could consistently shoot 190-inch plus deer. But there's just not a lot of guys who have that amount of time with jobs and work, and they can do that. So, I mean, it always comes down to the rut. They can come in for 5 days and they get to see a lot of deer, a lot of action, and your odds are better then, as far as amount of days you're able to hunt. But, I mean, I really think that there's a lot of units in Colorado where the archery hunt is a guy's best tag if you got some time to spend on it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking here at the Go Hunt Insider, and I'm just going to scroll down for an example. Like, here's 7, 8, 9, 19, 191 is a 68% draw with 0 points. Here's 15, 100% draw, 18, 27, 28, 37, 181, 371, 100%, 20, 100%, 23, 24, 97%, 25, 26, 100%, 29, 100%, 34, 100%, 35, 36, 45, 361, 100%, 38, 100%, and on. That's just a rough example, but it seems to me as an archer, like you said, if you had the ability to come and spend a lot of time scouting, wouldn't you agree that most all these Colorado units in the high country have big deer? I mean, 190 plus deer.
Oh yeah, I mean, I know for sure they do, and every unit in the state's like that, regardless of trophy book entries in the past or anything. And like you said, I mean, I highly encourage people, if you're sitting on a lot of points and you're not sure what to do, I mean, like even Eagle County Unit 44, you can draw those archery tags with 0 points. So use it as a scouting tool. Yeah, you might not shoot that 200-inch deer, but use it as a time to go explore the unit and see where these bucks are summering, talk to the locals, get the local knowledge if they'll help you, see what they know about the winter range, and then you can kind of pattern these deer and hopefully find them in the middle somewhere.
And I want to ask you, let's talk a little bit about the draws in Colorado, and you can put in for some of these hunts as your second choice and draw them and not lose your points. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct.
So explain how that works, because in Arizona and a lot of these other states, if you put in for your first and second choice, you lose your points if you draw. But how does Colorado work in that regard?
So if you put in on your first preference point only, and then your second choice, some of these units that you're talking about where you can draw them with 0 points at 100% chance, you draw the tag and you gain a preference point. And so, I mean...
So in other words, Clay, what you're saying is they need to put on their application the first choice is preference point.
Exactly.
Then the second choice, apply for some of these units that are 100%. They still get their preference point, and they also draw their second hunt, and they get to go hunting.
Yeah, and I get people all the time. I'm like, have you applied for preference points? And they're like, no. And I'm like, you've been thinking about coming to Colorado for 5 years, and you didn't apply for preference points? And they're like, no, I didn't know it was that big of a deal. So I'm always like, man, if you're not even thinking about hunting Colorado, at least put in for a preference point, because when you do get ready to come, I mean, 1-2 points might be the difference in you having to buy a landowner voucher or drawing the hunt.
Yeah, and so in Colorado, you've got the draw, and then you also just mentioned landowner voucher. And I know, over the years, the landowner voucher thing has been, kind of an up and down system. There's been some changes to it. There's been, no tag brokering. There's been a lot of things kind of involved with a landowner voucher system. Can you talk a little bit about how the landowner voucher system works in Colorado?
Yeah, so as an outfitter here, a lot of the ranches, the private ranches we lease, they can apply for landowner vouchers, and it allows them to take, have tags to take people on their property if somebody don't draw it. And so as an outfitter, it gives us another option if somebody wants to come and they didn't have enough points, or they don't even they want to put in for preference points, don't want to waste their 3 to 4 points on the tag. They have the option of buying a landowner voucher. And, depending on the unit and where it's at and the people, those tag prices can vary. I mean, they can be really high dollar in some of the better units, down to $500 in some of the less known units, so they're out there for an option. I mean, the general public, it's hard for them to get them because of the fact that most of the outfitters that lease the lands and stuff, they usually get first ride at them. But it is an option for people looking for a guided hunt.
And so just to reiterate what you're saying is, if people have points and apply, that's great. They can also just buy a landowner voucher and still apply. So in other words, if they don't draw, they can buy a landowner voucher and it does not affect their points. So I could buy a landowner voucher from you. I could come hunt, say on a 3rd season or on a 4th season or on an archery hunt, and it doesn't affect my points in any way, and I could buy a landowner voucher from you every year if I wanted, correct?
Yeah, exactly. And there's actually some ranchers and stuff in Colorado that they don't want an outfitter on it, and so they'll just sell their landowner voucher to a general public guy for a trespass fee, and it's self-guided. They get a hunt on that guy's property, and you get a tag with it pretty much. But at the same token, it's a lot of the landowners, they don't want to sell it to the general public because you have to give access to the hunter to your property if they buy your voucher. And so a lot of the people that own the land, they don't want the people on their property, But most of those guys don't even apply for that landowner vouchers then, or they just give it to friends and family.
Let's talk about that just a little bit, just so I'm clear. When you get a landowner voucher, let me back up. If I were to buy a landowner voucher, I can come hunt the private land that's associated with that voucher, and there's also unit-wide vouchers, correct? Exactly.
Yep, there is unit-wide ones, but they're starting to give more and more of the private ones, it seems like, the private land only.
And the private land only, what's the stipulation that if they give you private land only vouchers, you also have to let a certain amount of the public hunt? Is that correct?
Nope, that's not correct. But so a lot of people get confused too. So if you buy a private land voucher from, say, for instance, our ranch, some people think that you're only allowed to hunt that piece of private when you're really allowed to hunt private on any of the private in that unit. So
it's not it's all of the private in that unit, but not the public ground on that particular private land voucher. If you got a unit-wide voucher, then you could hunt private and public throughout the whole unit, but you can't just go hunt private that you don't have permission for.
Exactly. Yep, that's true. You can't. It's just whatever you can get permission to hunt on.
Okay. But the benefit of a unit-wide voucher is, let's say I have a unit wide voucher and I'm hunting your private land. If there's public ground, whether BLM or forest or whatever, and a big buck goes off the private, goes on to the public, I can then pursue that buck and go hunt that buck on the public ground. If I have a private land only voucher, I have to stay specifically on that private ground.
Exactly.
Yeah. But if the buck goes across, crosses through public and goes on to another piece of private, let's say a neighbor or a friend of yours, and I have permission to hunt that private ground as well, I could then pursue the buck on that private ground.
Exactly. Yep, that's true.
Okay. And then speaking about the draw, and we're going to kind of get into how you do your hunts and what have you, people listening can also apply through the draw process and draw a tag in the units that you guide in the units that you have private ground in, and can book a hunt with you, correct?
Yeah, that is correct. And I always try to encourage them to contact me before the draw because, like you said, some of these areas you can draw them on second choice. So I know that you're going to draw it, and I don't want to have like 20 people call me after the draw and want to book a hunt because I'm very limited on the people I take because I'm trying to manage for more of a trophy style deer, And so I'm only taking a handful of people. So I try to encourage them to contact me before they draw, and we can kind of discuss points and some different options we have for different points.
And by calling you early, in essence, what it does is it allows you to kind of organize who's going where and try and space out and make everything work the best. Calling after the draw, it's tough because at that point, then they're limited to landowner vouchers.
Yeah, and usually, as an outfitter, usually by the time the draw is over, you're usually booked. Once in a while, you'll get a cancellation or something, then we can take that guy, later on. But for the most part, we like to be contacted before.
Okay, Clay, let's talk a little bit about your hunts, starting from the beginning of season and how those hunts progress through the season. Do you do archery hunts? Do you do the muzzleloader hunts? And kind of walk through what you do on an every year basis.
Yeah, so we do them all. We do archery, muzzleloader, and rifle hunts. And they're all really good hunts up here on our private lands. For instance, in the archery season, we do a lot of habitat improvement on our ranches, and we plant a lot of alfalfa fields. They got turnips, different things in them, and so we get a lot of wildlife that hang out on our ranches at all times. And it's a very important factor of why, for instance, some of our ranches are better than others around here, is just because of the fact that we have those food plots and those habitat improvements. We brush beat, we clear acreage and stuff, we put water holes in. We're doing a lot of different things to hold wildlife longer in all seasons throughout the year. So at all times, you never know what you're going to see on the ranches.
One of the things to point out, I guess we should say, specifically the areas of private ground that you hunt in the most, what units are those? There's a bunch of units. What do they what do those units encumber there?
So yeah, for the most part, where I outfit out of is like Unit 18, 181, 27, 37, 371, and 28. I got some contacts and ranches down in 68, 681, 682. So that's kind of, for the most part, where I outfit out of. So it's a big area. There's a lot of land here. If you look on the GMUs.
It's a big amount of country. The thing to point out, though, is it's not there. A lot of these units are not extremely hard to draw units, so it makes opportunity for someone like yourself. I think that you're not guiding in some of the units that take 17 points to draw a tag, or 12 points to draw a tag. But I think with that comes, I imagine it's hard to try and manage private property when the deer could very easily just walk right. You spend time trying to help grow these deer and such, and they just walk right off your property right onto public ground. But that's kind of part of it, isn't it?
It is, and that goes back to depending on how much snow we have during that third season. I mean, the wildlife around here, they're triggered by the weather, and if we get a big snowstorm in November, they'll move very quickly down into their winter range, and most of the winter range is public, so it opens up a lot of opportunity for the public guy.
Yeah, for sure. So the archery hunts, you run archery hunts, and are those? Do you do any like high country mule deer hunts, or is it? Or let me back up. The areas that your private ground, what is like the average elevation of where your private ground is, and then are those deer on that archery hunt, in the summer, so to speak, are they on your property, or are still a bunch of the deer way up in the high country as well?
So we range from like 70 to 200 up to like 9,000 feet on the ranches we have. And, like I said earlier, these deer come from all over, so they're spread all over. And on our ranches, mainly because of the habitat we've put on there, we have a lot of resident deer. So they're on us all year. We got bucks that we've watched. We raise them in the summer, and they're there in November come the rut. At the same time, though, we do get a lot of bucks move in November.
In other words, you've got a bunch of does, so the bucks just show up, and they also show up because they're coming down because they don't want to get stuck up in the high country in the deep snow. Exactly,
because there's a lot of basins up here, sage basins and stuff that are up there, and they're trapped in the bottom of these 13,000, 12,000 foot peaks, and if they don't get out of those valleys, they kind of get stuck in there, or it's really hard for them to get out, and then it just takes too much out of them.
Over the years, working with a bunch of the governor's tag hunters, you've gotten to know the state pretty well. In your mind, from an archery standpoint, speaking specifically about public ground hunters, in your mind, what are some of top units that you would rattle off that you would encourage people to look at to hunt and be able to have an opportunity at, say, 180, 190 inch plus deer on the archery hunt?
So, like Unit 55 and 4, they got some good high country areas, and anywhere that you can see those big above timberline basins, with the big patchy willow bottoms and stuff and grassy areas, you have a great chance. I mean, like I said, most units in the state on the western slope have that kind of country, so really anywhere does, but a lot of people seem to apply down there for 55, 54, mainly because it's a lot of public and that high country basins. But at the same time, a lot of the people shoot most of the big deer on private lands. You see a lot of the bucks summering on the ranchers, river bottoms and stuff in the alfalfa fields, and once they strip their velvet off, they kind of go back up in the timber and disappear until the rut.
You mentioned those big above timberline basins. For people listening on the podcast, how, in your mind, do you think people can research and find those areas where those above timberline basins are, where there's those big willow benches and willow patches kind of down in the creek bottoms and what have you? You've obviously said 54, 55. Like, do you think searching on Google Earth, I mean, would you call Forest Service? What would you do to, if to the people out there listening, what would you do to try and find those areas where it's going to be most conducive to find those big, velvet deer?
So, yeah, you definitely got to do your research. You can call the Parks and Wildlife, and they'll give you a lot of valuable information. I do a lot of research on Google Earth myself, learning new areas and kind of picking spots that I think are good. And the best way to learn them is honestly just to hop on there, find an area, and then, put your boots to the ground and go check it out. I mean, that's how you find most of your big deer in new cool spots. But, I mean, most of the people that hunt, they aren't physically able to or won't go into those areas. So it's, it takes a certain mindset to go up there and stay for 3 to 5 days in a backpack tent, dry food and that whole deal. And just a lot of people aren't willing to do it, put the time in. So, but for the guy that is, man, there's endless possibilities out there for for the person that'll do that. And, you know, I use Go Hunt a lot. They have a lot of great information on their website. You know, they got maps, you know, a lot of valuable insight. You know, you can call the team over there and they'll give you some good advice. It's a very useful tool that I've become to use a lot.
For sure. And I think specifically when you're talking about draw odds and like that tip that you gave earlier about not only your units, you know, but there's a lot of units out there that, like you just said, if you apply for a preference point as your first choice and apply for some of these 100% chance, or, you know, say over 75% chance with 0 points, or, you know, 1, 2, 3 points, you know, even if you had a lot of points using this Go Hunt Insider to see what your best opportunity, because you can also look at harvest success, you can look at, you know, draw odds. You can find some of those units that, you know, man, the quality is good in that unit, but also I can get it on my second choice and not affect my points. That's huge.
It is. That's for sure.
Why do you think some of the units like, you know, 21 and some of the units that are notorious in Colorado for big deer, you know, it seems like there's some areas that are every bit as good if you really did the research, and then there's some units that are just popular, you know, the 201s and, you know, some of the units. It just seems like there's a lot of hidden opportunity in Colorado if you really kind of dig into it.
That's for sure, man. And, you know, like you said, you always got your Unit 44. Everybody hears about, you know, Eagle County. And the thing about Unit 44 and these trophy units is there's just such limited amount of tags. It's almost impossible for people to draw them and to, you know, go to that area. And with the point creep every year, it's harder and harder. And, you know, I get a lot of people calling me with 18 to 20 points, and I'm just like, man, I don't know. It's frustrating. You're better off to burn them and hopefully get a good deer, and then, you know, enjoy a lot of these lower point units that you can hunt year after year and have the, you know, just as good of odds almost.
Yeah, and, you know, you mentioned, it's funny, you mentioned 44, and I'm just looking at the Go Hunt Insider. For instance, 44, if you're talking about muzzleloader deer September 10th through the 18th, I mean, it's an 89% draw with 1 point. So one of the best units, you know, let's say one of the most popular units for big bucks, and it's notorious, I should say. You can go there and hunt with a muzzleloader with 1 point and have an 89% chance to draw it. With 2 points, you have 100% chance to draw that tag.
I know, it's crazy.
Whereas you go to the same unit in 44, let me pull up like a 4th season, and I'm betting it's going to be super high points. Mm-hmm. It's crazy because you talked earlier about those deer move a long ways, but I would venture to still say there's a bunch of those big deer in 44 are right there during that muzzleloader hunt. You just got to go find them.
Yeah. And you know what's hard about Unit 44 for most of the people putting in, you know, they got the 23 points it takes to draw a 4th-season tag is, yeah, they draw the tag, and that's great. But there's no resources out there for, like, for instance, me to go over there and guide and outfit you, because there's only, I think there's one outfitter in Eagle that's allowed to hunt most of the area. And then some of the better spots, they don't have any outfitters because you're in conflict with the mountain bikers and the people that jog and stuff, and they don't want to give a permit for those areas. So there's really no resources where a guy can, you know, pay an outfitter to go over there and help them out. So they're kind of going in it blind. It's kind of a bad thing, you know. You put in that many years and you can't have public knowledge or somebody go over there and help you enjoy your hunt.
Yeah, I'm looking at Unit 44, November 5th through the 13th, 3rd season last year. The same hunt that you can draw a muzzleloader permit with 1 point. It's 11% draw with 20 points, and it's 100% draw with 21 points. Mm-hmm. That's just mind-blowing to me. I mean, this is a perfect example where, you know, if you use a tool like this Go Hunt Insider, I mean, if you do your homework, you can go there on a muzzleloader hunt and work it out. I'll bet you could kill 180-inch plus deer. Yeah,
and so like the deal with over there in that area is it's really thick. You know, you get a lot of the oak brush down low, and then it's real thick, heavy, dark timber up high. and there's not a lot of those big subalpine basins and stuff that everybody, pictures when they go up in the high country. So that's one thing about why there is big deer over there, is because of how thick it is, the limited amount of tags. And it's hard for people to kill those big bucks with a bow or muzzleloader over there. But at the same time, there is giant deer there, and you always have a chance to see one there. Anywhere you go, it's just a matter of how many days you got, and how much time you'll spend hiking around in the quakey patches and the big meadowy spots in the mid country, the mid elevation stuff, because they are there. But it's hard to capitalize on that when the opportunity arises.
I'm looking here. You said units you got in 18, 181, 27, 37, 28. If you apply for an archery tag, it's 100% draw with 0 points. So you could literally put in, if you're listening to this podcast, you can literally put in and go archery deer hunting and go hunt with clay right there. And then let's click down here to, I'm scrolling down to muzzleloader. It's 100% draw with 0 points. You could go hunt with clay. I'm running an ad here for you, Clay.
Yeah,
just kind of mind-blowing because I see the size of deer. I see what you're doing. And here is second rifle season, October 22nd to October 30th. Last year, 100% draw with 0 points.
Yep.
And so my question would be, I would look at that and say, well, yeah, but look at this. Third season, 100% success, 0 points.
Yep. And so I would tell the public guy that, if they're looking for a hunt where they got a lot of country, and if they'll, I always refer to put your boots to the ground and do your homework and hike into these farther places, get away from the general public, you have good odds. But for the most part, it's really frustrating hunting these lower point units because you'll drive around on a lot of the public and you'll see literally hundreds of people. So it's very frustrating. I do know a handful of public people that come up here and they have very good luck, but it all depends on how much work you want to put into it. And if a guy's not afraid to do a little hiking, man, there's some great areas.
Yeah, and it definitely is one of those things where I'm sure when you go through these odds and go through these numbers and see, easy draw odds, that also equates to, like you said, a ton of people.
Yep.
But that's also where value is brought in, like yourself, knowing the country really well, but even more than that, having private ground. It becomes extremely valuable. Whereas maybe in some of the units like a 44 or a 21 or a 201 where it's every bit as good a hunting on the public as it is in the private. I don't know that the private has quite as much value in that
exactly
regard. You know what I'm saying?
And you get over in like Eagle and Vail and that valley, and there's a lot of people with a lot of money who don't want anybody on their properties, and they've got 1,000 acres, and there's never been anything harvested off of that place. So yeah, I mean, you get into them towns, and there's a lot of wildlife in the city limits. You can drive through town and see a 200-inch deer, and I mean, that's just what they do. They live there year round. They don't leave. So it can be frustrating, but the public in those units is just as good as the private, like you said.
I think I want to bring something up here, and it's worth mentioning. I think you bring up a good point because you've got guys like yourself that are 6th-generation ranchers and families that are also, multiple generation ranchers all over the state of Colorado that and kind of private landowners in general all get thrown into the same category with some public hunters. And I'm going to try and be a little bit ginger here, but they're just private land, and they don't care about the wildlife. Well, you're talking about there are people that have a lot of money and they have these properties and they are not going to let hunting at all. And then they have guys like yourself and families that you know that are saying, no, I'm going to let people hunt. Obviously, I'm going to charge a fee. But to me, there's a difference. And I feel like you guys, and I use that term loosely, you guys all get thrown into the same category of private landowner and sometimes get vilified when, hey, I'm a private landowner, but I allow hunting. Yep. So I'm not the total enemy here, whereas and I don't want to say anybody that's, has money and doesn't want hunting is that you should be an enemy, but what I'm saying is a lot of times guys like yourself that are ranchers that love hunting but have 6 generations of family that have owned property get passed down. You own that. It's in your family or people that you lease ranches from. That's they've paid for that. Mm-hmm. And I just want to point out that, from my perspective, and I'm speaking on my opinion only, like there's a difference. There's a difference when you have guys like yourself, Clay, that are, generational families that allow hunting. Of course it has value and you're going to charge a fee, but it's better than the ranch that gets locked up and doesn't allow anybody to come hunt.
Yeah, and what I see a lot around here is there's some people that come in here and buy these big ranches and they don't know hunting for, 10, 15 years. And they finally, the wildlife becomes so abundant on it that they have problems with their, eating stuff out, and it becomes an issue. I mean, hunting is a very useful tool, and it's not saying that you have to go in there and kill every animal on there. But if you manage it correctly and, take a certain amount of animals off of it, it's good for a lot of things. And a lot of the places here that haven't allowed hunting on it, you start to see a lot of bad genetics in there too, because, they just continue to breed and you're not taking them out. And so hunting I think it should be utilized by most people. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to pillage the land and animals on it, but it should definitely be controlled and done on most of the properties around here, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, it's just funny to me how some and there's some Western hunters that look at Western landowners that are selling hunts on their private land, and they kind of vilify that. But the same, hunter will go back and hunt with a farmer back in Iowa, and it's just they own ground back there. I don't really see the difference. I mean, like, you've got a farmer that's taking care of his land and managing his wildlife back in Iowa or, Ohio or Michigan or what have you. And then you've got a rancher, maybe not a farmer, but maybe a farmer or a rancher that owns property in Colorado. And sometimes those people get vilified. I don't like that personally. I'm all for public land hunting. I'm all for private land hunting, and I think there's a place for each one. And I just thought I would get into that. But I want to talk to you about the success of your archery hunters, and then go through your archery, muzzleloader, and rifle, and kind of trophy expectations and kind of the bucks that you see get harvested, and what you guys harvest from year to year.
So on like our archery hunts, we generally have 100% chance of opportunity. Everybody that comes always gets a shot, and you see a lot of deer. And the people that harvest them, we generally take that 165 to 180 inch type deer. And, every year we get a couple over that 180, 190 range. And, every year there's a 200 incher that comes through our properties. And, not just one, but there can be, numerous ones, or some years there ain't any. But we generally take that 165 to 180, 185 type deer. And, shot opportunities, 100%.
Okay. And then the muzzleloader hunt, that also takes place in the velvet. Do you do muzzleloader hunters as well?
We do. And so essentially, we have weird muzzleloading laws here in Colorado with what you can use, and no scopes kind of cut back our yardage. But, you can shoot a little farther than a bow. So you get out in that 100-yard range, 150. It does increase your chances of taking a deer. And same thing, we get 100% shot opportunity on those hunts also.
What Do you see the same type of quality as the archery, or does it go up just a smidge?
Not really. But it does allow the guy that when you do see that, higher quality deer, it does increase your odds of getting him just because of the fact that you don't have to get quite as close.
Yep, makes sense. And then as you transition into what is called the second rifle season, why don't they call it the first rifle season? That's one question I always have is it's the second rifle season, but it's actually the first. Explain that to me.
Yeah, it's the second season, but it's the first season that you can hunt rifle deer. So they got a first rifle season elk only, and so they just kind of rolled into second.
Gotcha. Okay, and then second season, what kind of buck are you chasing? By second season, that's usually what kind of late, mid to late October. Are you chasing, in essence, the same deer, or are now you starting to deal with a little bit of migration and a little bit different deer on your properties?
Essentially it's the same deer, as we were hunting earlier, but we do, the deer kind of move around a lot, and I'll go back to our, food plots and all the habitat work we've done. It does draw more deer in than other places. And second season in general in the state of Colorado is usually a very tough hunt. The big bucks they kind of go off and they're getting ready for rut, and they're eating all the time, and they kind of stay hidden out. But where we have all these great, habitat improvements, these deer never really leave because they're doing all that on our properties. They got way better food than they can get anywhere else. What kind of quality do hunters kind of expect to see and harvest on that second rifle season? So it's kind of the same type deer. You're hunting that 165, 180. We killed a couple 180 bucks last year on our lease, and that's a great deer anywhere. As you start to get into that third and fourth season is when you really start to see a bunch of those new bucks that you might not have seen them the year before. Even they just funnel in there out of this high country, and at all times during the summer we've got 40 to 80 does on our property, and as you start to get into that end of second season, it ain't nothing to drive around and see 100 to 250 deer on our property. Wow. It's crazy. And that's when you see that's when you start seeing those 180 plus bucks. And then as you go from third to fourth, it just gets better and better. And then, of course, I'm sure after the season's over, that buck that you've been, waiting for all year shows up at Thanksgiving after you stuffed full of turkey. You go out on a drive and they're all over the place. It is. It's crazy. I mean, those big bucks, they're smart, man. But if the snow drives them down, they got no choice. They come out. I'm not saying that that's all of them. Like I said, you do get the big bucks that come in earlier too, but it dang sure helps, I want to touch on, I know that you like KUIU gear, and KUIU is a sponsor here of this podcast. Talk to me about the different pieces of KUIU gear that you use and why, and what you like about it. So I own probably every piece KUIU has. I love all of what they've done with their gear. Up here, our seasons change so much. You don't want just one piece. I need a layering system where in the early seasons I can take it off, because it can be below freezing in September here, and then at 10 o'clock it's 65, 70 degrees. So if you don't have a layering system, you're sweating, and then you got the odors and you're uncomfortable. So essentially what it lets you do is you're comfortable at all times, and they've done a really good job with some high quality gear. It's breathable. Like I said, I think I own every piece they have. Let's say for the archery hunts and the muzzleloader hunts, kind of in the early season, what pants do you wear? So I got really I use their guide pants all year. I don't really have a problem with my lower body, with heat and stuff. So I'm always comfortable in those. I actually like the little thicker layering in them for when you're on your knees and stuff, and they got those attack pants. I think it's the attacks with the knee guards. Yeah. And those are awesome for archery, because I've had times where I've been on my knees waiting for a buck to stand up or an elk coming in and you can't move. Yeah, you're talking about the alpine pant. Yeah, alpine with the knee pads. Yep. And so, really you can't go wrong with any of their stuff. And, I always wear the guide jacket. It's just one of those layers that I have on in in September and October and in November. But I mean, you can't go wrong with any of their gear. And like I said, if you have every layer, you can always take it off.
Do you find, as you know, going into third and fourth season, do you wear the Kuiu Super Down jacket or the new Kenai jacket that's the synthetic? Which one do you find yourself using more, if you had to choose between the Super Down and the Kenai synthetic?
So it kind of depends on what I got planned for the day. If I'm going to be out hiking and kind of going to be away from the vehicle for a while, I use the Super Down because it's super light. I can throw it in my backpack. It doesn't add a bunch of weight. And if I'm kind of cruising around, you know, on the Rangers or, you know, out of the pickup, I'll wear the Kenai. It's a little thicker. You know, it's not a lot heavier, but it's a little heavier. And I mean, really any of it's good. I mean, that Ultra Down that you're talking about, it for as lightweight as that jacket is, it is amazing how warm it is.
Yeah. Have you been able to use any of the tents?
Yes, I have.
Yeah. I like that two-person Mountain Star tent. That's the one I've been using. I like the fact that you got, you know, 2 entry points, to entry and exit on both sides, and it's, you know, 3.5 pounds. So it's really easy to set up, and it's durable, and I enjoyed using that.
Yeah, I use it all the time pre-season scouting. I mean, there's days I'll go up and stay for a couple days in the not higher country, but just higher than normal, and it's too far in the vehicle to come home at night. So, like you said, it's super lightweight, easy to set up, and that 2-person entryway is the only way to go if you're hunting with a buddy, because nothing worse than your friend crawling over you in the middle of the night to step outside.
Yeah, for sure. I get you there. Well, it's been awesome having you on the podcast, and I want to give you a chance to let the listeners know how they can get a hold of you if they have any more questions. You know, and then you mentioned some southern units in Colorado, and there's a wealth of knowledge here, and I just want to give you a chance to let them know how they can reach you.
Okay, yeah, I appreciate that. So I got a website, hillhunting.com. And then, you know, most of my contact information is on there, so you can find me on there. Instagram, Hill Guides and Outfitters. Same with Facebook. And, you know, I mean, I encourage people to call. Not necessarily. I mean, I'm not looking for everybody to book a hunt. But like you said, I mean, growing up here, I got a wealth of knowledge of most of the state. We got friends all over, you know, out to the plains. And if anybody has any questions regarding, you know, drawing odds or statistics or, you know, just want to talk hunting, give me a call, and I'd love to talk to you.
That sounds good. Well, buddy, sounds good. I might have to come see you there during fishing season this summer and look you up. So thanks for sharing with us and spending time here, okay?
Yeah, thanks, Jay. I appreciate it, bud.
All right, I look forward to seeing some of the big deer you guys get. It's always fun checking out your Instagram page. Yeah, we'll see what happens this spring. I'm excited. Good. You've got some deer. I know you've got some deer that you've been kind of have high hopes for and such, so that's always fun and keeps you motivated, huh? Oh, man. And then just there's a few on some of our leases that I'm really excited to see what they look like this year. Awesome. All right, buddy, take care. Okay, thanks, Jay. All right, God bless. Bye. Yeah, later, bud.